I walked past her for 173 mornings, believing we were strangers. I was wrong. What my daughter discovered she'd been saying to me every single day shattered the person I thought I was. This is the story of a message, a little girl who learned to listen with her eyes, and how a single translation revealed a kindness I had been blind to for months. I'm Leo, a single father to my 6-year-old daughter, Chloe, and for nearly 6 months, our morning routine included a silent exchange with a stranger at the bus stop, a deaf woman who signed a message to me I was too ignorant to understand. This is the story of how a child's curiosity can dismantle an adult's assumptions, and how the most important conversations are sometimes the ones we never hear. But to understand why her words broke me, you need to understand the wall I didn't even know I was building. Our mornings were a delicate clockwork of survival. My alarm screamed at 5:45, Chloe's at 6. By 6:30, we were stumbling out our apartment door into the gray Chicago dawn, me with a travel mug of bitter coffee, her with a half-zipped backpack and sleep in her eyes. The 7:05 bus was our lifeline. It got her to school and me to my office with exactly 11 minutes to spare. The bus stop was a slab of concrete with a plexiglass shelter fogged by breath and neglect. And every morning without fail she was there, a woman in her late 20s, always sitting on the far end of the bench, a book open in her lap. The first time I saw her, I noticed the graceful, deliberate movement of her hands tracing the page. I thought she was just fidgeting. It wasn't until the third morning, when Chloe waved and the woman looked up and signed back with a smile, that I understood. She was deaf, and she was reading Braille. I gave her a nod, the universal gesture of commuter acknowledgement. She responded with a series of fluid hand shapes, her fingers moving in a pattern that was clearly language, but one I was illiterate in. I just smiled awkwardly and looked at my phone. It became our ritual. We'd arrive. She'd sense our presence, look up, and sign that same sequence. I'd nod and pretend to be engrossed in the weather app. I told myself I was being respectful by not staring. In truth, I was embarrassed by my own ignorance, and I assumed our interaction was as meaningless to her as it was to me, just two strangers sharing space until the bus came. But Chloe was captivated. "Daddy, what's she saying?" she'd whisper, tugging my coat sleeve. "I don't know, sweetheart, she's just saying hello," I'd say, making an assumption that felt safe. Chloe, however, didn't operate on assumptions. The next morning, she marched right up and waved vigorously. "Hi, I'm Chloe." The woman's face lit up. She pointed to herself, then made a sign. A W shape moved across her chin. "Wendy," I guessed silently. Wendy then began signing to Chloe, slower this time, more demonstrative. Chloe watched, mesmerized, then mimicked the gestures clumsily. Wendy laughed, a silent, bright expression, and corrected Chloe's tiny fingers gently. A knot of anxiety tightened in my chest. "Chloe, come on, don't bother her," I said, pulling her back. Wendy looked at me, her expression unreadable, and signed the original, faster phrase once more. I just shook my head and shrugged, the universal sign for I don't get it. Her smile didn't fade, but something in her eyes shifted, a patient resignation I mistook for indifference. This went on for weeks, then months. The seasons changed. The bench went from cold metal to sun-warmed concrete, then back to frost-rimmed steel. Wendy was a constant. Her signs were a constant. My awkward evasion was a constant. I constructed a whole narrative in my head. She was just being polite. It was the deaf equivalent of mornin', nothing more. I was a busy, tired, single dad. Learning a new language wasn't in the cards. The wall wasn't malice. It was just the easy mortar of routine and self-absorption. The first crack in that wall came from Chloe's first-grade classroom. It was parent-teacher night in early February. Miss Alvarez showed us the curriculum board. There, between basic math and weather science, was a unit titled Communities and Communication. It included learning the ASL alphabet and a few basic phrases. "We believe it fosters empathy and broadens their understanding of the world," Miss Alvarez explained. Chloe was buzzing. "Daddy, I'm going to learn how to talk to Wendy." A part of me, the part that hated my own awkwardness, felt a surge of relief. Maybe Chloe could be our translator. Maybe I could finally stop feeling like a jerk with a simple, childish intermediary. I bought her an ASL alphabet poster for her room. She practiced constantly, spelling out the names of her stuffed animals, her food, everything. "Daddy, your name is Elio," she'd sign it with intense concentration. Then one Tuesday morning, the routine broke. Wendy wasn't on the bench. The space felt oddly empty. Chloe was visibly deflated. "Where is she?" she asked, her voice small. I felt a pang of something unexpected, not guilt, but concern. Had she been sick? Had she moved? The mystery of her absence was somehow more potent than her presence. It forced me to realize she had become a part of our landscape, a person I somehow relied on without ever knowing. She was back the next day, but something was different. She looked tired, her shoulders slumped. When she saw us, she didn't immediately sign her usual greeting. She just watched us approach. Then slowly she raised her hands. But this time the signs were different, more deliberate. She repeated a short sequence 3 times, looking directly at me, her expression earnest, almost pleading. It was no longer the familiar, fluid ripple I'd grown to ignore. This was new. This was a message. And I had no idea what it was. I did what I always did. I offered a weak, confused smile and a shrug. Wendy's hands fell to her lap. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, then looked down at her book. The bus arrived. As we boarded, I glanced back. She wasn't reading. She was just sitting there, staring at the braille dots under her fingertips. That night, Chloe was practicing her signs at the dinner table. "Daddy, what does this mean?" she asked, making a gesture with her fist rotating over her heart. "I don't know, Bug, maybe home. Ask Miss Alvarez tomorrow." But a seed of dread had been planted. Wendy had changed the message. She had tried to tell me something specific, and I had shrugged it off. The easy narrative of polite, meaningless ritual was crumbling. I was no longer just ignoring a hello. I was ignoring a communication attempt. The wall I'd built wasn't just between us. It was now a barrier she was actively trying to breach. 2 days later, the turning point arrived. I was picking Chloe up from school. She exploded out the doors, her face alight with urgent excitement. "Daddy, Daddy, we learned it. We learned the sign." She was practically vibrating. "Miss Alvarez taught us the number signs, and then she taught us a question, a really important one." My heart began to thump against my ribs. "That's great, honey. What question?" Chloe stopped, planted her feet on the sidewalk, and with the solemn focus of a scholar unveiling a discovery, she raised her hands. She made the sign for you, then the rotating fist over the heart I'd seen days before, then the sign for okay. She signed it slowly, carefully. You okay?" she sounded out. The world screeched to a halt. The traffic noise, the chatter of other kids, the wind, it all melted into a silent, roaring vacuum. Wendy's new signs, the earnest look, the repetition. She hadn't just been saying hello all those months. And that morning she wasn't just being polite. She had seen my exhaustion, the dark circles I hid behind coffee, the forced cheer for my daughter. She had been asking me every single day a simple, profound question. And that day, when she changed her signs, she was asking it with urgency. "Are you okay?" My knees felt weak. I had to lean against the car. Chloe, misreading my shock for confusion, tugged my hand. "Daddy, did I do it wrong?" I looked down at her innocent, worried face, the face of the child who had just become the bridge over a canyon of my own making. The first terrible wave of understanding crashed over me. Wendy had never been a passive part of our routine. She had been a witness, a silent guardian. And for 173 mornings, I had been telling her, in the clearest terms possible, that her concern was not worth my attention. Chloe stared up at me, her excitement fading into confusion. "Daddy, why are you crying?" I had no answer for her, because the truth was too heavy to speak. The cliffhanger of my own failure was now staring back at me through my daughter's eyes. If "Are you okay?" was the new message. What in God's name had she been saying to me every day before? I couldn't answer her. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that her father has been emotionally deaf? I just hugged her tight, my tears soaking into her hair, and whispered, "You did it perfectly, Bug. You're amazing." The drive home was a blur. My mind was a storm of shame and frantic, backward calculation. 173 days. What had I missed? That night after Chloe was asleep, I did something I hadn't done in years. I sat alone in the dark living room and I wept. Not the silent, exhausted tears of single parenthood, but great, heaving sobs of profound remorse. Wendy hadn't been a piece of the scenery. She was a person who for nearly half a year had looked at the tired, stressed man with his daughter and asked, every single morning, "Are you okay?" And I had replied, with my shrugs and my averted eyes, "I don't care what you have to say." But that was the new sign, the urgent one. The original message the one she'd signed every day for months before that Tuesday, was still a mystery, and that mystery became an obsession. I had to know. It was no longer about curiosity, it was a debt I needed to understand before I could even think about repaying. The next morning, I approached the bus stop with a different kind of fear. Wendy was there. When she saw us, she signed the new sequence, the "Are you okay?" sign. This time, I didn't shrug. I looked directly at her, and though I didn't know the signs, I tried to project an answer. I nodded slowly, then touched my chest and gave a small, sincere smile. It wasn't language, but it was acknowledgement. Her eyebrows raised slightly in surprise, then she nodded back, a softness returning to her eyes. On the bus, Chloe was buzzing. "Daddy, you talked to her." "Not really, honey, but I tried. We have to learn more signs, we have to ask her what the old ones mean." And so our project began. It was no longer school unit for Chloe, it became a family mission. We bought a book. We downloaded an app. Our dinner conversations were peppered with clumsy finger spelling and giggles over missigned words. I learned thank you and sorry. But those felt insufficient, too small for the vastness of my negligence. The breakthrough came a week later, and it was from the most unexpected place, a cartoon. Chloe was watching a show on her tablet where a character used ASL. In one scene, the character made a sign, a flat hand patting the chest, then extending outward. The subtitle read, "I care about you." My breath caught, the motion was familiar. It wasn't exact, but it was in the same family as Wendy's original fluid sign. Was it possible? Could her daily message have been that simple, that profound? I rewound the clip, watching the sign again and again. "Chloe, come here, look at this." We spent the evening cross-referencing. The sign in the show was a common ASL construction for "I care for you" or "I hold you in my heart." But Wendy's sign was slightly different, more complex. We were getting warmer, but we were still guessing. And guesses weren't good enough. I needed certainty. I needed to know the exact words that had been offered to me and rejected. So I took a step I should have taken months earlier. I reached out for help. I emailed Chloe's teacher, Miss Alvarez. I told her the story, leaving out my overwhelming shame, framing it as a beautiful mystery. She was thrilled. "This is exactly why we teach this," she wrote back. She offered to help. She even knew a deaf teaching assistant at the high school, a woman named Marley, who might be willing to assist. But here's the thing about secrets you've kept, even from yourself. When you start to uncover them, they unravel everything. My quest to decode Wendy's signs became a mirror, and it reflected back a man I didn't like. I saw my isolation. I saw how after Chloe's mom left, I had built a fortress of routine with me and Chloe inside and everyone else, including a kind woman on a bench firmly outside. My ignorance wasn't an accident, it was a defense mechanism. Engaging with Wendy would have meant acknowledging a world outside my bubble of survival, and I didn't have the energy. Then the pivot, the reframing of everything. Marley, the deaf teaching assistant, agreed to a video call. On a Thursday evening with Chloe by my side, I described Wendy's original sign sequence as best I could. I tried to mimic it. It was a two-part sign. First, the right hand made a C shape and tapped the chest over the heart. Then both hands opened, palms up, and moved forward in a gentle, offering motion. Marley watched my clumsy attempt, her expression focused. She asked me to do it again, slower. Then she nodded. She signed back to the camera, her movements clear and graceful. Chloe, with her beginner's eye, gasped, "Daddy, that's it. That's what Wendy does." Marley then typed a message in the chat. The words appeared on the screen, and they stole the air from the room. "That is a common, cherished phrase in ASL," she wrote. "The first part, the C hand on the heart, means my or mine. The second part, the open hands moving forward, means to give to you. Together, it is a very warm, personal expression. It translates most closely as, 'My heart is with you,' or even more literally, 'I give you my heart.'" I felt the floor drop away. My heart is with you. For 173 mornings. This wasn't a casual greeting. This wasn't a deaf person's version of mornin'. This was an offering, a deliberate, generous, and deeply personal offering of solidarity and compassion. She had been giving me her heart, and I had been handing it back, unopened, with a blank stare. The weight of it was astronomical. This woman, who navigated a world not built for her, who faced barriers I could only imagine, had reserved a piece of her quiet morning to bestow a gesture of profound kindness upon a struggling stranger. and I had treated it as noise. Chloe was reading the chat. She sounded out the words, "My heart is with you." She looked at me, her eyes huge. "Daddy, she loves us." That was the second pivot. The word love hung in the air. It wasn't romantic love. It was the love in the sense of human connection, of shared space, of seeing someone and affirming their existence. In deaf culture, as Marley would later explain, such signs are not given lightly. They represent a choice to connect, to bridge the gap between a hearing world and a deaf one. Wendy had chosen to bridge that gap to me every day, and I hadn't even known there was a bridge being built. The revelation of the message was Act 1. The understanding of its cultural and emotional weight was Act 2, and it came with a terrifying corollary. If her original message was, "My heart is with you," and her new message was, "Are you okay?" then she had seen a change in me. She had seen my okayness fracture. Her shift in signs wasn't random. It was a direct response to my deteriorating state. She had been watching me closer than anyone, even my own family. Armed with this nuclear truth, I didn't know what to do. Gratitude was a feeble emotion. An ASL thank you felt like a pebble thrown into the Grand Canyon. I had to do something. But what? Approach her and sign? My hands felt like clumsy bricks. Write her a note? That felt like a cop-out, a hearing person's shortcut. For the next 3 days, I was paralyzed. I saw Wendy. She signed, "Are you okay?" I nodded and tried to smile, but inside I was screaming with the knowledge of what she'd been saying all along. The distance between us, now that I knew it was filled with meaning, felt like an uncrossable chasm. And then the complication, the bridge into the next escalation. The following Monday, Wendy wasn't at the bus stop. Tuesday, she wasn't there either. By Wednesday, a cold dread had settled in my stomach. Chloe was worried. Did we scare her away? I didn't know. Had my awkward attempt at acknowledgement been misinterpreted? Had she given up on us for good? On Thursday, desperate, I did something out of character. I got on the bus with Chloe, but I didn't go to work. I took her to school, then I got back on a bus and returned to the stop. I waited for an hour. She didn't come. I asked the bus driver if he'd seen a deaf woman with a Braille book. He shrugged. Lots of people, man. I was adrift. The person whose silent language had become the most important conversation of my life had vanished. And I realized, with a panic that sharpened into clarity, that I couldn't let that be the end. I had to find her, not just to say thank you, but to finally have the conversation she had been trying to start 173 days ago. But how do you find a stranger in a city of millions? You start with the only clue you have. I looked down at the bench, at the spot she always occupied, and for the first time, I noticed something etched faintly into the metal frame of the seat, right where her hand would rest. Not graffiti, but a series of small, deliberate dots. A Braille message. She had left a signature in the only language that was truly her own, and I had no idea how to read it. A secret was literally written into the fabric of our meeting place, and I was holding the key but couldn't read the lock. I knelt there on the cold sidewalk, tracing the tiny, raised dots with my fingertips. They meant nothing to me. To Wendy, they were everything. It was a message, a name, a plea. I had no idea. But it was proof that this spot, this bench, held significance for her far beyond a convenient waiting area. This was her territory, marked in her language. I had been a guest in her space for 6 months and never even knew it. I did the only thing I could think of. I took out my phone and carefully photographed the Braille etching from multiple angles, the camera flash highlighting the deliberate pattern. This was my clue. My mission shifted from passive regret to active detective work. I had to find her, not for closure, but for a beginning. My first stop was back to Marley, the deaf teaching assistant. I sent her the photos with a frantic explanation. Her response was swift, but not the translation I hoped for. "This is grade 1 Braille," she wrote. "It spells out letters, not contracted words. I can transcribe the letters for you, but it might not be a full word. It could be initials or a partial word." A few minutes later, the transcription came through, Maya. Maya, not Wendy. Her name was Maya. For 6 months, I hadn't even known her real name. I'd assigned her one based on a guess. The humiliation deepened, layered now with a specific, personal disrespect. I had erased her identity before I'd even learned it. Maya, now I had a name, but a first name in a city this size was a needle in a haystack. I needed more. I started with the most obvious place, the bus route. I rode the 705 for its entire length, getting off at each stop, looking around, asking the drivers if they recognized the description of a deaf woman who read Braille. Most were indifferent. One older driver, though, nodded. Sure, Maya. Gets off at Foster and Clark. Always has a smile. Haven't seen her this week, though. Foster and Clark, a neighborhood about 20 minutes north by bus. It was something. The next day, I called in sick. I got off at Foster and Clark and just started walking. I didn't know what I was looking for. An apartment building, a community center. I felt foolish like a stalker, but the driving need to find her, to make things right, overrode the shame. I walked for hours. I showed the photo of the Braille on my phone to shopkeepers, to people at a coffee shop. Blank stares. Then in a small independent bookstore, I saw a display near the front, Braille editions and ASL resources. My heart leapt. I approached the woman at the counter, my phone already out. Before I could speak, she smiled. Looking for the Braille section? It's right over, I interrupted, which I never do. I'm looking for a person, a deaf woman named Maya. She reads Braille. I think she might come here. The woman's smile faded into a look of cautious concern. Why are you looking for her? I stumbled through an abridged version of the story, the bus stop, the signs, my daughter's translation, my desperate need to apologize and thank her. As I spoke, the woman's expression softened from suspicion to something like pity. You're the dad from the bus stop, she said quietly. The world tilted. You know me. Maya talks about you. Well, she writes about you in her journal. She comes in here every Friday to write. She said there was a father and daughter at a stop. She said the little girl was learning to sign. The bookseller, whose name was Elena, folded her arms. She said the father seemed very sad. She was worried about him. Hearing my own internal state described by a stranger, filtered through Maya's perception, was jarring. Is she okay? She hasn't been at the stop all week. Elena hesitated, a moral calculation happening behind her eyes. She's going through something. She lost her job last month. The community center where she taught Braille literacy lost its funding. She's been scrambling. I think she's been having a hard time getting to her job interviews. Transportation is a thing. A new dimension of Maya's life snapped into focus. Her consistency at the bus stop wasn't just routine, it was the backbone of her stability, and it had been fractured. The "Are you okay?" sign took on a new, heartbreaking symmetry. She was asking me while her own world was crumbling. Elena wouldn't give me an address, but she agreed to pass along a message. I wrote a note, not a thank you note, an invitation. Maya, my name is Leo. My daughter is Chloe. We have been learning. We would be honored if you would let us make you dinner, so we can try to say what we should have said long ago. The bench isn't the same without you. I left my phone number. For 2 days, my phone was a stone. No calls, no texts. The silence was agonizing. Chloe asked every hour if Miss Maya had called. My hope began to curdle into despair. I had blown it. My apology was too little, too late, and too invasive. Then, on the evening of the second day, a text from an unknown number. No words, just a single image, a screenshot of a bus schedule, the 7:05, for the next morning. And then a second text, I will be there, 7:05, Maya. The relief was so intense it was dizzying, but it was immediately followed by terror. She was coming back. What was I going to do? What was I going to say? I practiced signs in the mirror all night. Thank you. I'm sorry. My heart is with you too. My hands felt alien and stupid. The next morning, the air crackled with anticipation. Chloe was dressed 10 minutes early. Daddy, are you ready? No, I was not ready. We walked to the bus stop, our footsteps echoing in the quiet dawn, and there she was, Maya, sitting on the bench, her hands folded in her lap, no book. She was waiting for us. As we approached, she stood. She looked tired, thinner than before, but her eyes were clear and calm. She didn't sign first. She waited. This was my moment. My daughter nudged me forward. My mouth was dry. I raised my hands. I signed slowly, painfully, my fingers trembling. Thank you, I am sorry. I finished, my face burning with the inadequacy of it. Maya watched, her head tilted. Then she smiled, not a big smile, but a real one. She signed back, her movements fluid and patient. Your sign for sorry is for breaking a thing. Use this sign. She showed me a different motion, a fist circling the heart. It means sorry from the heart, for feelings. I had gotten the sign wrong. Even my apology was linguistically incorrect, but she was gently correcting me, teaching me. It was the kindest possible response. Chloe couldn't contain herself. She stepped forward and signed, carefully, "My name, Chloe, I am happy to see you." Maya's face lit up. She knelt down, bringing herself to Chloe's level, and signed back, "I am happy to see you, Chloe." Then she looked at me. She signed the original phrase, the one that had started it all, the C hand on the heart, the open hands offering forward. "My heart is with you." This time I didn't just see it, I felt it. The meaning washed over me, no longer a puzzle to solve but a gift to receive. Tears welled in my eyes. I pointed to my own chest, then made the offering motion back to her, mirroring her sign as best I could. I had no idea if my grammar was correct, but the intent was there. "My heart is with you too." She nodded, accepting it. Then she signed, "You okay?" I took a deep breath. I signed better now, and I meant it. The bus arrived. The three of us got on together. We sat. Maya pulled out a small braille notepad and wrote something. She handed it to Chloe, along with a small card that had the braille alphabet printed on it. A game, a connection. Chloe was in heaven. It felt like a resolution. It felt like the happy ending, but I had invited her to dinner. And as we approached her stop, she signed to me, "Dinner, tonight, you're home, yes." I nodded, signing back, "Yes, please." She smiled a little sadly this time and got off the bus. I watched her walk away, and the complexity of her life that Alina had hinted at came rushing back. This wasn't just about the signs. Her absence, her job loss, the stress in her eyes, they were part of the story too. I had been so focused on decoding her kindness that I hadn't considered the weight she might be carrying herself. That evening she came to our apartment. She brought a simple gift, a children's book about ASL with illustrations. The dinner was awkward and beautiful. We communicated in a messy, glorious mix of my broken signs, Chloe's enthusiastic spelling, and Maya's written notes on her phone. We learned she was 28, that she had been deaf since birth, that she loved gardening and mystery novels, that losing her teaching job had isolated her from the community she loved. And then, as Chloe was showing off her room, Maya wrote a note on her phone and handed it to me. It read, "The braille on the bench, it was my sister's name. She passed away 3 years ago. That was her favorite stop. I go there to feel close to her. Meeting you and Chloe there, it felt like a gift from her. That is why I signed to you every day. You were in our special place." I stared at the screen, the words blurring. The bench wasn't just her territory. It was a shrine, a place of memory and grief. And for 6 months, she had shared that sacred space with us. She hadn't just been offering her heart. She had been inviting us into a holy, private part of her life. My oblivious presence had been, in her eyes, a blessed intrusion. The magnitude of this final revelation was staggering. It reframed everything again. Her patience wasn't just kindness, it was reverence. Her signs weren't just greetings, they were benedictions offered at a personal altar, and I had treated it all as background noise. The wall I had built wasn't just between a hearing and a deaf person. It was between a grieving person offering an olive branch of shared space and a man too wrapped in his own survival to see he was standing on hallowed ground. The cliffhanger of Act 1 was what was she saying? The cliffhanger of Act 2 was far more devastating. What holy thing have I been profaning with my ignorance? As Maya left that night, she gave me a hug, a quick, surprising gesture. She signed, "Thank you for dinner." And then, the sign for family, circling her fingers in front of her face. Chloe was already part of her heart. I was haltingly being invited in. I closed the door, my mind reeling. The mystery of the signs was solved. The mystery of Maya was just beginning. I had found her, thanked her, and in doing so, discovered that the story was infinitely deeper and more fragile than I'd imagined. I had been trying to cross a bridge of language, only to find I was standing in the middle of a bridge of grief, memory, and sacred trust, and I had no idea if my clumsy feet were worthy of it. The conversation had finally started. But now, I was terrified of saying the wrong thing. Worthy or not, the bridge was there, and the only thing more terrifying than crossing it was the thought of staying on my side, alone. So I made a decision. I would stop being a guest in her sacred space. I would learn to be a caretaker of it. This was no longer about saying sorry. This was about showing up. The first thing I did was enroll in an adult ASL class at the community college. Not an app, not a book. a real class with a deaf instructor. It was humbling. I was twice the age of most students, and my fingers moved like they were stuck in glue. But every Tuesday night, I sat in that classroom and I learned. I learned grammar. I learned about deaf culture, that it wasn't a disability but a linguistic identity, a community with its own history and art. I learned that my initial assumptions weren't just ignorant. They were part of a systemic hearing-centric view of the world that Maya navigated every single day. Chloe and I practiced together. Our dinner conversations evolved from clumsy fingerspelling to simple signed sentences. The pasta is good. School was fun. I love you. Our home, once silent except for cartoons and my tired sighs, began to fill with a new, physical language of connection. At the bus stop, everything changed. It was no longer Maya initiating. It was a conversation, slow, simple, but a conversation. I could ask, "How are you?" I could sign, "Cold morning." She would answer, "Teach me a new sign," ask Chloe about school. The bench transformed from a place of silent, missed connections to a vibrant, if quiet, meeting point. We learned she loved gardening but didn't have outdoor space. We learned her favorite color was the deep blue of a twilight sky. But the real test, the true consequence of my awakening, wasn't in my signing ability. It was in my ability to see her needs, not just her kindness. Elena, the bookseller, had mentioned Maya's job search was struggling due to transportation. The bus was reliable, but rigid. Job interviews are rarely on a convenient bus schedule. So one Saturday, I wrote her a note. "I have to go to the hardware store across town on Saturday. If you have an errand or interview in that direction, I would be glad for the company, no pressure." I left it vague, giving her an easy out. She texted back an hour later. "I have an interview at 10, near the hardware store, company would be good." The car ride was the first time we were alone, without Chloe as our joyful buffer. The silence was different now, not empty, but full of potential. I had my phone's text-to-speech app open on the console. She typed, "Thank you for this. Buses make me anxious for important things, too many variables." I spoke my reply, and the app turned it into text for her. "Everyone deserves to arrive at an important day feeling calm," I said. She got the job. It was part-time at a library, assisting with their new accessible literacy program. She texted me the news, followed by a string of happy face emojis. Chloe and I made a congratulations card, with Chloe drawing a giant book and me writing in clumsy print and even clumsier braille, using a guide I bought online. We left it on the bench. The relationship deepened, naturally, organically. She came over for dinner every other week. We celebrated Chloe's birthday, and Maya gave her a potted plant with a tag in braille and print, "Watch something grow." Chloe was enthralled. We helped her plant a small container garden on our balcony, her hands getting hours in the soil. Then on a rainy Sunday in October, the final loop closed. We were at our apartment, the three of us baking cookies, a mess of flour and signed laughter. Maya paused, wiped her hands, and took out her phone. She typed a long message, her expression serious. She handed it to me. "I want to tell you about my sister Anna," it began. The braille on the bench was her name. She was hearing. She was my big sister, my translator, my best friend. She died suddenly, an undiagnosed heart condition. That bus stop was where she waited for me every day after her work. We would ride home together. After she was gone, I started going there just to feel close to her. Then you and Chloe appeared, a father and a daughter. You looked so lost, but so full of love for each other. It felt like a message from Anna, a sign to not be alone in my grief. So I gave you my heart every day. I didn't expect you to understand the signs. I just needed to give it. I read the words, tears streaming down my face. I handed the phone to Chloe, who read slowly, sounding out the words. She looked at Maya, then wrapped her small arms around Maya's waist. No signs were needed. I finally understood the complete picture. My shame, my regret, they were my burdens to carry, but they weren't the point of the story. The point was the offering. The point was that in the depths of her grief, Maya chose to extend a radical, persistent kindness to a stranger. My failure to see it didn't diminish her act. It only highlighted the quiet, heroic consistency of it. That winter, we didn't just share a bus stop. We shared holidays. Maya joined us for Thanksgiving, bringing a brailled recipe card of her mother's stuffing. Jessica, Chloe's mom, even joined us for Christmas dinner. It was awkward at first, but Maya's gentle presence acted as a bridge there too. Jessica saw the change in me in Chloe. She saw the joy this new chosen family brought. The tension eased. replaced by a respectful, if distant, warmth. The most surprising detail, the one I never saw coming, came in the spring. Chloe, now in second grade, was chosen to give a short presentation about someone who inspires her. She chose Maya. With her teacher's help, she prepared a few sentences in ASL. At the school assembly, in front of hundreds, my little girl stood up. She signed slowly and clearly, "This is my friend Maya. She taught me to listen with my eyes. She taught my daddy to see with his heart. She is my family." Maya, sitting beside me, watched Chloe's hands. She saw her own name signed. She saw the sign for family. She reached over and gripped my hand, her shoulders shaking with silent tears. In that auditorium, surrounded by hearing people, my daughter had created a moment of pure, accessible understanding. She had built the bridge all the way across, and she had done it not out of guilt, but out of love. After the presentation, Maya gave Chloe a small, worn velvet box. Inside was a silver bracelet, delicate and simple. Engraved on it were two words, "My sister." Chloe put it on and hasn't taken it off since. It wasn't a replacement for Anna, it was an expansion of the family heart. The bench at the bus stop is still there. The braille etching of Anna is still there. But now, sometimes you'll see three people there, a man, a little girl, and a woman with a book. They talk with their hands. They laugh without sound. They share the space, not as strangers, not as a sanctuary for one, but as a common ground they built together. 173 mornings of missed connections led to this, a chosen family, forged in gentle persistence and redeemed by a child's willingness to learn. Maya gave me her heart when I didn't know how to receive it. Chloe taught me how to hold it. And in the end, I learned that the most profound conversations aren't always heard. They are seen, they are felt, they are offered again and again until someone finally learns how to say, "I see you, and my heart is with you too." The bus arrives. The three of us get on together. The routine is the same, the route is the same, but nothing will ever be the same again. And for that, I will be forever, silently grateful. Our story is specific: a bench, a bus, a silent offering repeated until it was finally received. But the question it leaves behind is universal. How many messages are we missing? Not in sign language necessarily, but in the quiet grammar of everyday human care. The neighbor whose wave you're too busy to return. The coworker whose quiet sigh you don't ask about. The stranger whose presence you treat as part of the scenery. Maya's gift wasn't just her heart. It was her patient, persistent proof that connection is an action, not a feeling. It's something you do again and again without the promise of being understood. She signed into a void for 173 days. That's not just kindness, that's faith. Faith that the wall between us is thinner than we think. Faith that someone someday might try to look over it. We live in a world that prizes the loud, the instant, the clearly articulated. We've forgotten how to read the quiet signs. We've pathologized loneliness while building systems that guarantee it. But what Maya and Chloe taught me is that the antidote is disarmingly simple. It's not grand gestures, it's showing up. It's learning the language, however clumsily, of the person in front of you. It's accepting that you will get it wrong and trying anyway. The bus stop is still there. The etching of Anna remains. But now it's not just a memorial, it's an anchor for something living. A new family, built not from biology, but from choice and repaired understanding. That's the final, surprising truth. Sometimes, the most profound healing doesn't come from fixing what's broken inside you. It comes from finally seeing the person who's been sitting beside you all along, holding out a piece of their heart, waiting for you to notice. So I leave you with this. Look around your own routine. Who is in your landscape? What silent language are they speaking? What bridge is already being built, awaiting only your first, clumsy step? The conversation might not start with words. It might start with a sign you don't yet understand. But understanding can be learned. Connection can be chosen. Thank you for listening to our story. If it resonated with you, if it made you think of someone in your own life, consider sharing it. And if you want more stories that explore the quiet, human connections that change everything, hit that subscribe button. You never know what message might be waiting for you just around the corner, on an ordinary bench, on an ordinary morning. All you have to do is learn how to see it.